Hey everybody, this is Travis Weller, and thanks again for joining me for the 2-Minute Clinic. And it's my pleasure to welcome three people that I had the opportunity to work with in the conducting program at Messiah University to share their insight and perspectives as a music educator. First up is Chris Steele, who teaches in the Prince George's County Schools and down in Maryland. He is president-elect for the DC Music Educators Association, a freelance trombone player, and if he wasn't busy enough, he's also doing some adjunct work with Howard University. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Doc.
And next is Stephen Maldonado, and Steve is down at Baker Middle School in Corpus Christi, Texas. Stephen, welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Weller.
And finally, joining us from Northeast Pennsylvania and also doing work in Elk Grove School District, but also working at Clark Summit is Kat Amabile. Hi, Kat.
Hi, how are you?
Good. We'll keep it a little bit current right now as we talk through some things, but I guess the first question, and Chris, I'll lay it out to you because I know you're already going to be in a unique situation here for these next few months, but how are you making preparations for the fall, and what's your schedule look like?
Well, my schedule for both the university and public schools is virtually online, so I will be here in the house. I have to learn Blackboard, learning management system, and so I'm going to be using Blackboard and Google Classroom extensively for my middle school kids. So we're all virtual.
Stephen, and for those of you tuning in, Stephen looks extra fresh because he just had his first day of school today. So Stephen, again, thanks for making time for us tonight. I know you had a lot on your plate today.
That's why I'm nice and shaven. If not, I would look like Chris.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, talk to me about your first day and what your schedule is looking like right now.
Right now we are online up until, I think right now our county, we are online until the 8th of September, until Labor Day. And we're scheduled to go back on September 8th and with a hybrid of either online or in-person classes. But we're also doing asynchronous learning. So if students were unable to make the class today, then we have to submit lessons asynchronously. I'm still trying to figure that part out. Right now, like I said, we're going until early September, but I'm not sure if that's going to continue. I have a bad feeling we're going to continue going online probably until October. It's getting pretty bad down here.
And Kat, what are things looking like for you?
For my full-time job at Elk Lake, I teach 5 through 12 band. Our students are starting on a hybrid model on the 27th. So I'll see all my students, I'll see one group for 2 days and then the other group for 2 days at the end of the week. I probably will be doing some online lessons, like for sectionals on the days that the students are at home. So that way I'm not pulling them out of class since they're only going to be in school for 2 days a week. We use Google Classroom extensively, and I've been helping some other staff members work with that and, kind of helping with some technology training. And then for my adjunct duties at Clark Summit University, I'm teaching a teaching music in elementary schools course, as well as my 2 saxophone students, and those will be taught in person.
Okay. Great. I know each of you are in just a little bit of a different situation. And I know, like, in terms of your teaching on a day-to-day basis, there's lots of different things that you're considering for your students. And Chris, I'll let you talk first here, but when it just comes to selecting repertoire for your groups, what are the things that you are coming to first, and what drives your repertoire selection?
In terms of rep, so I have also a unique situation where I also teach choir. So I do mostly 2 parts. But I start with 1 part, obviously, so we can get unison. But in terms of band, I just try to find a musical value, and just as simple as possible. I try to look for what my kids know, where I want them to be, and they get that in their fundamental block, but also where I want them to be. So I might choose a higher level grade piece so that it does push them, but they're still getting that work in the fundamental block. So it's kind of a mix, but right now we're doing ones and twos. Um, so nothing that's going to be too hard. But I try to make sure my low brass players and percussion are considered. Because I know my tuba players, my trombone, and especially my trumpet players sometimes may not have the range to play certain certain pieces. So you have to be aware of the ranges and the instrumentation.
And like speaking as a low brass player, you know, in that middle school setting, like, you know, I had days where I was sort of bored, and you know, getting that opportunity to, like, you know, I didn't know tubas played melody until I played Emperata Overture by, like, Claude T. Smith, and it said solo in my part, and I was like, is this a mistake? You know,
What does that word mean?
right. Solo. The only solo I knew at that point was Han. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. So, you know, I'm glad to hear you say that, like, taking into consideration, you know, what's my instrumentation, and you know, and where do I have players that can really, you know, push it, you know, for, you know, lack of a better way to say it. So, Stephen, how about you?
Along the same lines of what Chris said and what you just said, it depends on my band. If I have the horses, we're going to go for a ride. Like if I have a stacked clarinet section, I'm going to push them. If I have a weaker flute section, then I'm going to look, and a strong clarinet section, I'm going to look for something that'll feature the clarinets and kind of hide the flutes or my other weaker sections. But it also, that's what, like Chris said, I'm not going to pick a piece that has trumpet A's and G's and A's above the staff if I don't have kids that can barely hit an E. So it also depends on the students' playing ability and also instrumentation. I'm not going to play Salvation is Created if I don't have a French horn player.
Right. Is it ever a thought, and, you know, Chris, feel free to chime back in just real quick, is it ever a thought that you pick a piece just so that they could grow into something? They could become what they yet not are?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just depends on which time of the season it is. If it's around like concert and like contest festival season, I go a little bit on the conservative side and I go for their level. But when it comes to spring concert, then I push.
Okay.
Then I push.
All right. And Kat, where do you find yourself? And you've got a real different, because you're thinking about fifth grade, you're thinking about the, you know, 7-8 group, you're thinking about 9 through 12, and you know, you've got a wide gambit that you've got to be considerate of.
I would say, like, the macro or like the bigger considerations that I take at first are the strengths and the weaknesses of the group and the instrumentation. Will the students like this repertoire, and will I like it? That's a pretty important thing to consider as well. And then what do I want them to learn from it? So whether it's something that has to do with the harmony or the rhythms or the message that the composer is trying to convey. And then once that's like the bigger picture, and then kind of the little details inside of that would be like kind of the exposure of the sections, and, you know, what might push a group or what might be too much or too little. How the parts are divided, you know, that's something to consider, especially because I'm in a smaller school. So I might have, you know, one French horn one year, or maybe the next year I only have, you know, not maybe necessarily a staff clarinet section, but, you know, things I have to take into consideration with that. You know, percussion, what's the availability, where are the strengths? Do I have a lot of keyboard players? Do I only have one? And that, you know, harmony, chromatics, you know, things like that.
It's really interesting, you know, to hear each of you talk, and one of the, you know, that common thing, and finding that sweet spot where, you know, that, okay, I've got players and they're going to enjoy this challenge, or I've got, you know, I know the time of the year, and Stephen, you had mentioned that, and I do think about rep, you know, from concert to concert as, okay, let's let this take us somewhere. But I also think about rep from, you know, concert 1 to concert 4. And, like, you know, you think about that sequential, you know, ascent that we want to get those, you know, we want to get those kids on. Stephen, I'll let you start, and because you're in year number
15.
15, that's what I thought. Okay. You're number 15. Like, as you have thought about that progression that you make over the year, and looking back, if you could tell young Stephen Maldonado one thing in year 2 as a band director about picking rep, like, where would you go? What would you say?
Well, I had really, really great leadership my formative years. I was a assistant middle school director that fed into a pretty good high school program. And the head director, he taught in middle school for about 15 years. So he knew what he was talking about as far as middle school. He taught me then, and I still do this today. So I would tell myself in year 2, the same thing that this gentleman told me. I try to scaffold. I try to look ahead to the end of the year. Well, I try to, at least. So for my winter concert or my Christmas concert, I try to program pieces that'll help for our March concert or festival performance. So if I'm doing a piece in, say, 6/8, I try to find a green sleeves or something along the easier lines of a 6/8 piece. If I'm doing something in, I don't know, 5/4, I try to find a piece that's in 5/4. I try to program a teachable piece to prepare them for our March performance. And then after that, then let's have some fun with spring concert. It's about a matter of let me push. This song is a harder grade 3 piece. Let's do it. I don't like it. It didn't work out after that initial read. Okay, let's put that one away and we'll never see that one again. Let's try this one. Ooh, that was pretty good. But we're going to come back to this. I might want to do this later on. So it's stuff like that. We read.
Just a quick aside, how often a week do you sight read? Or like, how often do you sight read? Maybe that's a better way to ask it. I know there was a high school director to the south of me when I was still in public ed. He sight read every week with his group, at least once.
In the spring, we actually, our evaluation, there's a sight reading portion.
Okay.
So we have our concert portion, and then we go and sight read. So in the spring, in the early part of the spring, I try to sight read about 10 to 12 charts between January and spring break.
Okay.
And then after we get back to spring break, normally by then our evaluation is over and we're just reading for spring concert. So at that point, hopefully they're pretty good readers by then, and I don't count as much. We don't shadow finger as much. It's just like, all right, here's an opening key signature. Here's the time signature. There's a meter change here. Watch your critical notes. Let's go. And if we crash and burn, we'll stop. All right, go back to measure 21. All right, 1, 2, ready, and then we continue.
Good. Kat, if you could tell your younger self one thing.
Well, I'll try to keep it to one, but the things I mentioned.
We'll give you two. We'll give you two.
The things I mentioned before, I think I didn't understand exactly what those considerations meant back then. I think I thought I did. So I remember very distinctly, like my first Christmas break, I went home to visit my family in Philly, and I went to JW Pepper because that was when they were still in Exton. And I went to go look for music, and I just remember texting my college band director, and I was like, so what do I buy? I had, really no idea of what to look for. And I remember I had it in my head, like, oh, okay, at the time I only taught 5 through 8. So I was programming for junior high, and I was like, okay, 7th and 8th grade, they need to play a grade 2. That's what junior high plays, and that's it. But, come to find out that that's not always the case. Your group might need to play a 2.5 or a 3, or maybe, on a certain level should be playing a 1.5, depending on the kind of piece. And also that not every publisher's definition of what a grade 2 is the same. And I didn't know that at the age of 22. So I think I would have told myself, don't necessarily look for, I can't buy a piece that has this rhythm in it because it's too hard, or I can't buy a piece in this key because kids that age can't play that. It was more, I think I was very afraid to make mistakes, which I certainly made a lot of them, for as terrified as I was to make them. So really just, it's not about like the cover or what the publisher says the grade level is of the piece or things like that, to really go in and study the score and get to the nitty gritty of it and think about how to teach the kids those concepts, and not just for face value what it says it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And on behalf of composers who write and submit to different publishing houses, We're sorry about the discrepancies, but nobody seems willing to budge, to correct any of that. Like I received a piece in the mail today that is in press, and it's listed as a grade 2, but it was being played by a 5th grade band. Like everything, like rhythmically, everything range wise, really spoke to it being more of a grade 1. But I think, that some of those other, the publishers are looking at like length of piece, and they're looking at techniques, and they're looking at some other things. They're like, no, this is what this is. And it does, the numbers sometimes are very misleading. It's a 3. Well, is it a soft 3? Well, it's a 4, but it's a hard 4, and and that it comes back to that other thing that you have all touched on, is knowing your band, knowing your students, what can they do, and so it requires that that study. So okay, so Chris, like this is year number 6, correct?
This is 6, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you're still a baby. Oh,
So
I am.
that's so cute.
All right, so Chris, talk to me, like in this very short time that you've been in, what's the thing that you would tell your younger self about?
Really find a way to know the literature from grade 1 or grade half to grade 3. Like really find out who those new composers are, look at the different state lists. When I was growing up, we didn't have that much. When I was in elementary school, it was a standard of excellence piece. Please, this is our piece for the concert, and that's what we're gonna do. There was like some dinosaur jams, and I don't remember some of the other pieces, and maybe like Balladeer. But we didn't. I found myself not knowing all these new composers that are bringing, putting out pieces left and right. Knowing the literature and knowing that just being able to facilitate the differences in the 1s and 2s and the 1.5, because the 1 and the 1.5 could be drastically different depending on which composer it is. So just knowing what your group can do, but knowing the literature so that you can fit the group.
Let me ask this question to all of you. Go back in your memory. What's your biggest bomb piece? The piece you picked, and like after you got into it, you're like, why? And maybe you had the opportunity to like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore, but because I can remember my first year in the gig, and I was working my high school band, and I'm really proud of what we're doing. I'm like, we're playing this, we're playing this, we're playing this, and I had my college band director come over because he was only about 10 miles away to listen to the group, and I'm so proud. And the kids left, and I'm I worked him hard, and he listened, and he's like, okay. He said, well, you're doing some really good teaching. He said, but your band can't play C songs, and you should be painfully aware. I'm like, well, yeah, we've got some sections that aren't quite good, but the concert's in another 3 weeks. And he's like, no, they can't play that. He said, they shouldn't be playing that. He said, this Turn Back, Oh Man by Holst, that's in the key of G. I would spend about 3 weeks in the key of G before I even gave out the piece. And like, I'm having this moment, like, I am so, and then I was like, oh, I'm sort of bad. Like, so, I mean, it was deflating, but again, it's, part of it was, Chris, as you were saying, I didn't know enough, accessible rep. And that's where sometimes I think we do a disservice a little bit to our, college music education majors. They might play in a really great group, and they might play some really high quality stuff. But what happens whenever, okay, your middle school band walked in the door and it's 21 players and your instrumentation is limited, and like, what do you know can work? So, all right, now I've stalled. Now I'm segueing right into, if you can think of, what was your biggest bomb piece?
I guess I'll go first. I being in it 15 years, I've always taught middle school. I've always wanted to teach high school, but I've always been in middle school. So I tend to bring back some pieces that I was successful with 5 years ago, 8 years ago. I did this one. This was really well. First time I did it, it went well. Second time I did it, it went pretty rough. A Portrait of a Clown by Kelly.
There you go.
I like the piece because it teaches young bands style, a lot of staccato notes, a lot of style. Second time we played it, got into that B section where there's no percussion, it's real lyrical. Yeah, I had a flute player that started to rush mid-performance. We're at evaluation. He's rushing bad. And then trumpets came in there was one spot where they entered and they were a whole measure off. They came in a whole measure early. So I have no idea how I did it. This was seven years ago. I stopped them and then I cued them at the right time. So we finished, and one of my colleagues, he said, "Don't do the clown, man. Don't do the clown. Stay away from the clown." Well, I did the clown. So I saw him and he goes, "Steve, that clown messed you up, man." Luckily for me, they pulled it from the list, so I don't have to worry about the clown anymore. Would I do it again? Yeah, I probably would do it. But I don't know if I'll do it for evaluation again.
If any of my students at Messiah watch this, that's one of the pieces I use in the senior instrumental methods class, because
it's a good piece. It's a really good piece. It's a great piece. Ranges are good for young players. No offense, it's also written for a weaker low brass instrumentation, which is why I've done it in the past. I've inherited bands that had one tuba, one trombone, and Johnny went from trumpet to baritone because I didn't have another baritone. So I've had to do that out of necessity.
Sure.
So it's really a great piece, but sometimes you have to do songs out of necessity based on your instrumentation.
Sure. Kat or Chris?
I don't know if it was a piece.
Please don't tell me it was a whole concert.
No.
Good.
So I had done some clinician work with the National Band Association in Maryland with some of their clinicians. I was the trombone clinician a couple times. So the president, I asked him to come over to listen to my band. I think this was the time where I had talked to you about the once a week only group. He came in and said, "Have y'all done this before?" He just looked at him. My snare drummer was absolutely clueless. I just went back there and I just said, "What are you doing?" "Don't know what I'm doing." 2 weeks we go to festival, or to the festival, even though it wasn't adjudicated. One boy who's on flute never brought his flute to class. Brought his flute that day. Sat down. Had the flute, playing the flute the wrong way on stage. And I saw it. Literally. One of the comments, I said, "What are you doing?" I'm on stage, just study with, Jim Colonna, Travis Weller, here we go. What are you doing? The comment was, "Make sure all students are holding instruments correctly." Well, yes, obviously that's an obvious one. It was like, oh my gosh, you should not have let him on the stage. But being inclusive, my school is very, very inclusive. We even went to my principal and said, "If he comes, do I have to take him?" "Yes, you do." He has to be on the stage. Okay. And so it was interesting afterwards to see it, because everybody called him out after that. "You made us get this. You made us get that." Mr. Still said nothing. I didn't have to say anything because the kids already knew what was up. So that was my one, was like, make sure the kids know how to hold the instrument properly.
It's there's a friend of mine who has a story about, you know, a kid, you know, trying to play the saxophone with the reed up here instead of underneath, and like you know, the teacher didn't catch on, you know, because this guy was a piano major and, you know, didn't pay attention in woodwind methods. And anyway, you know, we call that the French technique. So, you know, but we're in American high school, so well, let's.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
anyway, all right, now, Kat, you've had a while to think about this answer. I hope you've got a good one for us.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny because I feel like naturally I feel like I would have an example from my first couple years of teaching, but I don't know if I like repressed those first several years or whatever. But the one the only one that I could really come up with, and I'm sure there's more that my kids would probably tell you, there's more than one, obviously, but the one that came to my mind from a couple years ago, this is my 12th year now, was I did an arrangement of the Alleluia Chorus with my senior high band a couple years ago. And it was, and I cannot remember the arranger. It was a fabulous arrangement. I'm sure I will do it at some point again in the future, probably several times, but and I think it was like a grade 3, maybe a grade 3.5. So it was the first half of the year. And I'm thinking, okay, it's a grade 3, you know, kind of like not as hard as, you know, what it would look like in the actual score or whatever. It'll be fine. But I still failed to take into consideration that there's a lot of really like independent lines and like the canon, whenever, you know, the groups are coming in and playing by themselves. And when we were playing the unison parts, they sounded awesome. And then when we would get into the whole, you know, the fugue kind of things, and it was not so great. And I mean, we played it in the concert and we didn't have to stop and restart it or anything like that. But I just remember I put that one away and I was like, okay, that was probably not the best choice. And sometimes that happens. You think something's going to be a great choice and it is not going so well. And even more recent one than that, for our spring concert this year, we were going to do Rollo Takes a Walk, which is a fabulous piece. And my kids really liked it. But even right before the school closed on March 13th for COVID, I was considering pulling it because I would say, okay, take out Rollo. And like 3 of the kids were like, yes. And the rest of them were like, oh, not this piece again. But they all loved it when I gave it to them, you know? So sometimes you think something's going to go really well, even after you've been teaching for 10 years, and it doesn't always go that way.
And that's, I mean, I guess that's the hard thing. Like, you know, having pieces that you want to revisit. And, you know, Stephen, you talked about portrait, and, you know, we've talked about like recurring concepts. And so like with recurring concepts, we can revisit a piece, you know, like let's teach this concept because this piece will allow me to do that. Right. And it's amazing how like that change in personnel, that second time through it with a different group, and all of a sudden it's a house of cards, and you're just like, okay, I haven't changed that much. In fact, I'm more informed. Shouldn't this be going better? And, you know, so that there is that danger that we face. But speaking in terms also like recurring concepts, and you know, in my conversations with each of you, I know there's a lot to your personality as a human being. And I think your kids are really fortunate to have you in each of your situations. And so I guess one of the other things I want to touch upon, because I think about what the kids that are returning to school have seen over the last 7 months. And, you know, they've seen what has happened to an economy. They've seen what's happened, you know, socially because of the sickness, the tragedy involving George Floyd. The good thing there is we're able to have some honest conversations now about what it means to have equal access and why Black Lives Matter. And we're able to get into those conversations now. And so I'm just curious, and Kat, I'll let you start, but like, in thinking about pieces that allow you to teach about life, that allows you to be a human being and get a kid to a point where they understand how music has been a positive influence, how music has shaped you, and how like this involvement in this group called band, this little built-in self-contained community, you know, that some of the things that band understands would be good for the rest of the world to really think about and really embrace. And are there pieces that you think about doing that so that you can reach those kids musically, yes, but also personally, on other levels?
Yeah, there's two examples that I had thought of, one for a junior high level and one for senior high from the last several years. A couple years ago, we did the Johnny Vincent arrangement of A Closer Walk with Thee. We had a retired member of our staff who had passed away. She was very, very important to the community. So when I was talking to the students about the tradition of the New Orleans funerals and how it was more of like a celebration of life, and there was jazz music and it was happy. And that was kind of how this individual wanted us to celebrate her after she had passed away. So we, had talked about that and how that emotion was kind of conveyed in the piece. And I played a lot of different recordings for them so that they could hear it. And when we played it in the concert, we had friends of hers and come out to talk about her. And my former principal he used to be the band director at my school, and he came and sat in on the piece, and we were able to make a nice kind of celebration out of it and have a nice memory. That was the first thing I thought of. And then I believe either that same year, or maybe the year before that, my senior high concert had been scheduled for April 20th, which is the anniversary of, the Columbine school shooting. So we had played an American Elegy, and I had planned that a year in advance when I had scheduled my concert date, and I had chosen to do that piece. It fell on that date, and I was able to talk to the students about, that was something that happened in my lifetime when I was in school, and I was able to explain to them what that felt like, even though I lived all the way across the country, and kind of how that really shook up America a lot. And there was a lot of questions about safety in schools and gun control and things like that. And the music is really beautiful. I mean, anything Frank Kelly writes is amazing. But the students really gravitated towards that. And I had one student in particular, she's off to college now, but she really grew to love Frank Kelly's music through that, and would come to me and say, hey, can we play this piece by him or that piece by him? So those were two examples that I thought of right off the top of my head.
That, and again, that this is, and someone had made this comment to me, and it's sad, but it's also again a positive. Like, there hasn't been an incident in a school because the schools have all been closed. And again, as a parent, with 4 kids, like, that's just not something that I want from any kid, like to have that fear. And yeah, you think it just about how poignant American Elegy is, and how touching it is. And I know that's one of Bill Stoneman's favorites.
I should have mentioned that. The festival that I had him for, District 12 band in 2005, we played American Elegy, and he actually gave us the music for the alma mater, and we sang it. And then that was a moment that I would never ever forget. And like I told you before, I listen to that CD all the time still 15 years later. And so when we played it at my school, we actually had the chorus learn the alma mater, and they were out in the aisles and they sang it. And I just thought it was just a beautiful thing and a nice connection to make to them from a musical experience that I had when I was in school. And then they were able to have a similar experience to that.
Chris, where are you, and what pieces have you visited?
So I know for my last project, I did Omar Thomas's Of Our New Day Begun, which was the piece that he wrote for the Dylan Roof shooting in South Carolina at the church in Charleston. I've performed it multiple times. We did it at Howard a couple times. Because it's just everything in that piece, it's like a historical journey throughout the whole experience. And he, uses your how can I say, your embellished chords, your extensions to create a feeling that you're kind of in like a jazzy setting, but you're not in it because it means so much. And every piece, every part of the piece is like, this is what this is. Like, here's the gunshot. Here's the people in the church. Here's the aftermath of everything. Here's the before where the children are crying out. When you have programmatic music like that, you should even if you have an inch of some type of heart, you're gonna feel it emotionally somewhere. Um, and we just hope that as directors, our kids and students and musicians will feel the same way or get a similar situation or a similar feeling as they progress and learn the piece and learn about the composer. Just understand the content of the piece that's written.
And Chris or Kat, feel free to speak to this. And you know, I know we've got a separation between church and state, but both of you are bringing up pieces that have a strong, you can call it religious, religious connection, but I mean, it's a spiritual connection. And did either of you think about it like as, you know what, I'm just teaching this as a cultural moment, rather than a musical moment? Because if we're gonna, if we're gonna observe, all holidays, we're gonna observe all cultures, do we have that obligation? And I mean, did that enter your mind at all with either of those selections? And whoever wants to, speak to it, that's fine. And
I think I probably considered both, actually, if that's an okay answer.
sure, absolutely.
Because I do know with American Elegy, like the first reason why that idea had popped into my mind was because our concert was on April 20th, and I knew that date, stuck out in my mind. But also the music is just gorgeous, so I thought that there was a lot of opportunities for multiple different aspects of musicality and growing as young musicians. But I think I probably considered both.
Yeah, same. There are a lot of extended techniques, using growls for the brass, or a lot of bends, and some stomping and some singing as well. So it provides a lot of musical context that normally, let's say the only piece that I've sung and played was Ramparts. When we sang that Air Force hymn from the Ramparts. So um, I think when you sing, sometimes you have a closer connection to things once you learn the words. Hopefully everybody in my ensemble knows, lift every voice and sing. We're gonna hope on that. But it changes things once you sing it in a different context. And before just singing it before a sporting event or like singing a national anthem, it means something different when you're in this whole big context. So it just creates a different ambiance when you play the piece and listen to it.
Steve, how about you?
Maybe a slight change of subject. I mean, it's more like on a religious, but I felt bad because I would always talk about this piece in all of my writing and my submissions for you, but Hymn Song of Philip Bliss. Hymn Song of Philip Bliss and Near My God to Thee, the Michael Brown arrangement. Those two songs are the ones that just, they hit me. And I've gotten to the point where I've learned how to sell these two pieces to my students. And of course, there's a Amazing Grace, either the Edmondson for your younger bands or the Tekeli for your more advanced bands. I've never done the Tekeli as far as conducting it. I played it in college. But Philip Bliss, my first experience with it was my very first year of teaching. I was the assistant band director at a middle school, and the top band played it. And yeah, I heard it every day. It was okay. I heard it every day. No big deal. It was Easter Vigil. I forgot what year it was, but a couple years later, it was Easter Vigil, the 3.5-hour Catholic Easter Vigil Mass. And the choir starts singing it. And it was towards the end of the Mass. It was probably about 2.5 hours in, and it's a long service. And I start hearing the song, I hear the organ start at the beginning, and I go, and I start hearing the words. And then it gave me chills like it's giving me right now. It hit me. That's the kind of music I love, just the one that hits you. So then when I had the opportunity to teach the song with a really talented band with great, I had a horn player. I had a solid horn section, had a solid clarinet section, solid flute solo. So everything, all the planets were in alignment for this piece. The first thing I did was I opened up the score and I told him about the story. I told him about the shipwreck. I told him about the Great Fire of Chicago and Horatio Spafford having to leave his family and his life in Chicago and make a new life in England. And I told him how business kept him home and his wife went on that ill-fated ship and then saved alone. And then I just told him how he started feeling, he felt forgiveness, and how he told God, I'm okay with it. Yeah, that hits me. That hits me. And then the Lowell Mason song, the way I sell it, I go to YouTube and I showed my students that one scene on Titanic. I said, here, this quartet is, yeah. And there are times when I'm watching it, I tear up. So I'm watching it with my kids and I'm going, look, these guys know they're going to die. They are going to die in minutes. And they're playing the song saying, God, I'm getting closer to you. I'm getting that much closer to you at this moment. So that's what I like to teach music. I like to teach, it's not just notes, it's about life. I tell my kids when we're in a normal class, especially my top group, my beginners, I don't shed a tear in front of them because they're beginners. My canvas band, I don't shed a tear for them.
Oh, you might shed a tear in front of those beginners, but not for the reasons that maybe some of us are thinking.
Exactly. Was that good? No, yes, exactly, Dr. Whaler. I shed tears, but it's a different way. My top group, I get emotional with them. The last day of school last year, we had a Zoom session. And as I was telling my 8th graders goodbye, because I might not see them as much as I did before, I started to well up and I started choking up because I was saying goodbye to them. So I tell my kids, it's not just music. I'm teaching you life lessons. I tell the students, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how mad you are at somebody, make sure you always tell them that you love them, because you never know that this might be the last time. So if my kids learn something from me, that's what I want them to learn. All this, that's icing on the cake for me. I want them to know that no matter how mad you are at your mom, you tell them that you love her before you go to bed, because you might not wake up, she might not wake up. And especially more so now than ever. Sorry, I didn't mean to go all really deep on you guys. But
no, I'm glad you did.
Because that's my motivation. That's how I want to teach music. I want to teach the emotional part. Yeah, notes and rhythms. Yeah, that's all fun. That's icing on the cake.
I'll share with all of you, like this piece that arrived for me today it's called Lonely Travelers, and for a young band, it's a setting of the folk song 900 Miles, which tells the story of a man on a train, and he's trying to get back to his family after having been away. Excuse me. And then, the other tune that I've laid into it is Wayfaring Stranger, a person who is looking to move on and get to a better life. And they're both about, seeking that place. And that's one of the things that I'm worried about. We're going to have kids that are coming back to us that are lonely. And, they have maybe, school is maybe safer than home. And so I do think about that. And, I hope that we can use our bands, as a family, to make those kids feel welcome. And, that rep that we're going to be choosing for those bands is hopefully going to be something that makes them, feel a little bit normal again. We'll just go around, and Chris, any closing thoughts from you about rep selection, or wherever you want to go, man? It's open. It's open.
Well, one, I hope everybody continues to stay safe. And I think it's even more, we have to find ways to find some social emotional activities for our kids. Even if that means do kind of what Leslie Moffat has. She does like a 4-minute mindfulness activity at the beginning of each class, where it's just like, relax, everything's okay, just breathe. And it makes class so much better when everybody's back centered again. It's a stressful time right now. Everybody is stressed, from our leaders to our principals to teachers, parents, even the kids, they're about to be stressed out once they find out, oh, we don't have 4 hours of school anymore. We have a full day to be staring at a computer screen all day. So we just have to be mindful that these things are happening, and this is not optimal. It's not. I want to get back in the classroom. I want to see my kids. Sometimes I don't, but sometimes, but now, when you've been removed from them for so long, it's like you have to really figure out your why again. Why am I doing this? Is it just, so, and if you're not in it for the long haul with the right intentions, it's not going to last. So that's all I'll say.
Stephen.
I'm going to piggyback off Chris. Figure out what your why is. When you know what your why is, that'll make every day. Even the bad ones, even the days where you can't stand your teachers or your students, just remember your why. That'll keep you going. And always smile, even when you're having a bad day. Because as a teacher, like Dr. Weller said, some of these kids, they need school. They're tired of it at home. They might have a really bad situation where school is their only place where they get positive reinforcement or something positive. So even if you're having a bad day, even if you have that kid that just annoys you and knows how to push your buttons.
Or plays the flute in the wrong direction.
What was that, Dr. Weller?
I said, or plays the flute in the wrong direction.
Or plays the flute in the wrong direction. Just smile at them and go, hey, how are you doing today? And if they don't say a word, and then tomorrow I'm going to go, hey, how are you doing today? That you might break through and they're eventually going to say hi to you. So just be polite, smile to your kids, and don't forget your why.
And Kat, take us on home.
Well, I think with repertoire selection, as with anything with being a music educator, it's a process that you're not going to know it all on day one or your 15th year or even your 30th year. So, just accept that and and know it, and try to get your hands on as many different sources of information about learning about repertoire and making contacts and having, constant conversations with people, whether it's, your college professors or your own high school band director, if you still have relationships with them, or, your student teaching co-ops or people that you meet once you're out in the field working, and just continue to want to learn. Because if you want to learn and you want to learn about all the repertoire and the programming and the best way to teach things that's out there, then that's how you know that you're still becoming the best teacher that you can be.
All right. Well, hey, Chris, Stephen, Kat, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your journey. And I'd really love to have the three of you back on in about 6 months to see where all of you are with the with the academic year as it's going to be constituted. Again, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you for having us, Doc.
Hey, this has been Travis Weller with the 2-Minute Clinic. We'll see you again next time. Life, love, and music.